The apostle writes to his friends in Corinth, "When we break the bread, is it not a means of sharing in the body of Christ? Because there is one loaf, we, though many and varied, are one body. For it is of one loaf that we all eat." You know, it's really the most famous table in the world, and that even before the Da Vinci Code became #1 on the New York Times list. Of course, the heart of the Brown conspiracy story is this table, as portrayed by Leonardo in his painting in Milan. Brown, of course, uses the table to suggest that the figure to Jesus' right is really Mary Magdalene. In spite of the fact that down through the centuries, the artists have always depicted the disciple John as very young, perhaps even a teenager without a beard. In spite of the fact that if it is Mary Magdalene at that table, then you have another mystery, the mystery of where the 12th disciple is, because the theory only leaves room for 11. Many readers of the book seem to give the famous painting the authority almost of a snapshot, as if it bore any resemblance to that ancient table. As with the child whose teacher asked the class why they thought that Jesus and his disciples were sitting on only one side of the table. And the child very reasonably replied, so they could all get into the picture. So the famous picture brings to the contemporary world one rendition of that table long ago. And now it has made political news, no less, as Catholic bishops discuss whether a certain presidential candidate has a right to come to that table. But I will not get into that controversy this morning. It is, first of all, a table about the meaning of faith. To eat involves what? Quite simply, it involves reaching out, taking food, putting it into one's mouth, chewing, swallowing. And in a very real sense, that's what faith is all about. It occurred to me the other day while sitting in a restaurant how much faith is involved even there. Ever stop to think of the fact that with most of our eating out, we are ingesting something of whose origins we have no concrete idea, prepared often in facilities we have not seen by cooks whose integrity we do not know. Our act of eating there is, in fact, blind trust. Better not to think about it. So real faith, faith without which there is no life, is never and finally a matter of intellectual gymnastics, finely tuned reason, weighing pros and cons. It's not a matter of speculation or contemplation. It is not passive. And eating is an appropriate outer movement, which involves at the same time an inner movement of mind and heart in which we, in fact, reach out and embrace life, at least 3 times a day, do we not? All eating is faith acted upon. And even so, faith which is not embodied in action is really not faith, no less here at his table. And so he was always doing it. He shares bread and fish with thousands. He provides wine at a wedding feast. He presents the Passover meal to his Jewish friends. I wonder if I knew that tomorrow I was going to face death, and a grisly one at that. I wonder if I'd be up to hosting a dinner party with a very complicated bunch of colleagues. But he does it for them. And out beyond Friday, he returns to them again and again, doing what? Eating with them in this same second-story room in Jerusalem, breaking bread with a couple of them in the village called Emmaus, providing a fish fry for them on the shores of the sea where they'd return to their old trade. Like a mother, he's always feeding, saying, take, eat, trust me, take the risk, live. Live and live together with and for one another. Because he's creating a covenant community. Isn't it remarkable how linked eating and community really are in our lives? Of course, if eating is just a matter of fueling this old body, then it need not involve anybody else. But eating and drinking together, in fact, is the way we most often come together. If nothing else, we feel impelled to share the sacrament of coffee or tea or a glass of wine as we revive a friendship, come together again. Our lives otherwise are eaten up, if you will excuse the word, by commitments and concerns of daily life, labor and errands, banking, taxes, all the things essential and peripheral that pile up on our list of things to do. But it is eating and drinking together that most often reconstitutes us as community, as family, as friendship circle, as church, in fact. The early church, when it came together to worship, came together for a meal. Eirenos, the Greeks called it. The original Lutheran covered dish dinner, 1,500 years before Luther. It's no wonder the sociologists worry about the disappearance of the family meal, insisting that if the family is in trouble, it may in part lie in the fact that the family very rarely comes together at the evening meal where the concerns of the day can be shared, mother and father can catch up on the doings of David and Donna, where a brief prayer of gratitude can be said together. So this, his meal, is about covenant, and it's about a new covenant of love. And there's something primal about that as well. I think certainly love is more than just providing one another nourishment, but at the very instinctual level, it is that big time, is it not? How do mothers love? They love by feeding, whether infant or teenager. I knew my mother-in-law loved me early on, thank goodness, because she kept sticking food in front of me. And even in this modern egalitarian age, fathers still find some importance in being, as we say, a breadwinner. And what is love at its best? Well, I told a young couple as they stood before me at the altar here yesterday that it involves a kind of unqualified acceptance on days when they are at their best, so that they will be there for each other on days when they are not at their best, on days of candlelight and fine wine, but equally on days when the wine turns to a glass of cold water offered to fever and pain. We seem to know what real love is all about, or ought to be, whether we pull it off or not. And Jesus speaks of a new covenant in his blood poured out for the forgiveness of sins. His love for them in bread broken and wine poured that evening, his love for them in that bleeding body of a following Friday afternoon. It's all seamless. It's the kind of love that we all long for, bearing, enduring, believing, hoping, all things. A love that says, Father, forgive them all because they don't know what they're doing. And the covenant community that this kind of love creates is a community where everybody is welcome. Self-centered James and John, who come into the room fighting over who will get the choice jobs in the kingdom. Peter, full of bluster and bravado, who will promise far more than he is able to deliver. Yes, and even Judas, who has already made his bargain with the devil. To all of them, and to the Jews and Greeks, the slaves and free, the men and women, and yes, the kids, who will come hungry and thirsty over the following years, he says, take, eat, I'm here for you. And do it remembering me. When you eat this bread, when you drink this cup, do this remembering me. You know, that word remembering, it's a very interesting word in the Greek. It's anamnesis. We have its opposite in our word amnesia, meaning total loss of memory, and with it loss of identity in life. And how sad when that happens. But we are always in danger of amnesia, I think, when it comes to Jesus of Nazareth. Anamnesia is far stronger than just simply recalling some past event, someone known to us long ago. It really means to make the past present with us, vividly, in us, for us, now. Although my father died 48 years ago, there's a sense in which he is still present to me. in the attitudes and values and view of reality that I absorb from him, but he's only present with me as I bring him to mind again and again. And even so, the presence of Jesus has power to sustain and encourage and inform and transform our lives only as we call him again and again to mind. Jesus is powerfully present to those who in faith take and eat with him and his people in this family where everyone is welcome, everyone is at home. But let us also note on this Memorial Day that there is a straight line down the centuries from this covenant community of love, from this table to the visions and ideals which have shaped our national community. The idea of a covenant community of love, a community where everyone freely comes together. That's what it means. The idea of a covenant community of love as God's will for all humanity leads inevitably to the values of democracy and human rights and care for the least among us. It goes without saying that we've not always been faithful to this idea and vision as a people. It goes without saying that we've not realized it completely even now. It goes without saying that we have at times been misguided in our expression of it. But it has been at the heart of the American experiment and experience, and still is. Western civilization is inexplicable apart from the presence of this table, this vision, if you will, of a covenant community of love that embraces all humankind. A vision that entered our world with Jesus of Nazareth 2,000 years ago. Sadly, much of Europe seems to have given up on this heritage and past story. Right now, it seemingly cannot bring itself to recognize that heritage and remember it as it proposes a constitution for the Union. And the vast majority of its people no longer gather in remembrance around this table, remembrance of the faith that made the West possible. So it's left to us, I guess, especially to remember on this Memorial Day. Carrie Hosa remembers. Carrie is a daughter of our congregation. She's now first lieutenant in Iraq, in charge of a transport battalion. In her 5 months there, the battalion has suffered several serious injuries and one very tragic death. To where does Carrie turn to find the resources and strength to carry on as a leader there? She returns to the words of Jesus at this table, perhaps from her third-grade Bible. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. And in her email, she goes on this Memorial Day, these words have never hit so close to home and have never meant so much. I write to you from Iraq with my thoughts and prayers with you all on the village green this Memorial Day. As our country continues to help liberate Iraq and our soldiers endure the hardships of war, please take the time to think about and say a prayer for the soldiers who have given up all, and their families that will cherish their memories forever. For there's nothing more honorable than a man or a woman who has laid down his or her life for their fellow countrymen. May God protect those currently in harm's way and bless all who have died for their country in Operation Iraqi Freedom and every conflict before. God bless Carrie. But today's not just Memorial Day. It's also the day of Pentecost, a day which began when the once discouraged disciples, in despair no less, gathered again around this table, the day when this vision of a covenant community of love began to take shape in them, the day when hope was born that this might well be the future of all humanity. Those secularists in our time who argue that there's no necessary connection between religion and morality, I think, miss the point. It's not so much the question of morality, but the question of morale, which is at stake. what besides this old story and this old table gives us the hope to believe in these days, in this kind of world, hope to believe in the future? And in that hope, the spirit to persevere in the faith and love that came in Jesus. As usual, Fred Buechner put it about right. Through the eyes of faith, the Last Supper, though on one level a tragic farewell and failure, is also at its deepest level the foreshadowing of great hope. Frail, fallible, foolish as he knows his disciples to be, Jesus feeds them with himself. They are to take his life into themselves and come alive with it, to be his hands and feet in a world where he no longer has hands and feet. Do this remembering me, Paul quotes him as saying. In eating the bread and drinking the wine, they are to remember him. And to remember him not merely in the sense of letting their minds wander back to him in the dim past, but in the sense of recalling him to their present moment. They are to remember him the way we remember somebody we love who has died. He is alive again within us to the point where we can all but hear him speak, and our hearts are kindled with the power and reality of his presence still with us on our journey in this world. Back around 1970, restorationists began the arduous task of scraping 500 years of grime off that picture of Leonardo da Vinci and that Last Supper. After 2 decades of labor, the facelift was completed, and visitors, including Marlene and myself, were there to see it in the Santa Maria della Grazia Church in Milan. See that table scene now in rich, beautiful colors, brighter and clearer than ever.